The tight end position, it's not a sexy one. It's not one that we love talking about, but we do have to break down our tight end rankings. There is, one guy that stands above all else, a guy right behind him that stands ahead of the rest of the pack as well. But we will do our best to break down kind of our tight end strategy this year in this video, going through our top 15 overall tight ends, top 10 or so, pretty in depth. So hopefully you guys enjoy this. Hopefully you get some value from it. If you do, leave a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. If you guys are new around here, definitely appreciate the new subscribers this time of year. Danny, how you doing?
Doing well, doing well. Now, you guys would have saw our eyes gleam up, how much we enjoy talking about the wide receivers. Not going to see it as much when we're talking about tight ends, but regardless, we got to put out this content for you guys and get you guys best equipped for your fantasy football drafts. Obviously, you know a couple of the names at the top, but once we get into tight end 3 to 15, that's when you got to roll up the sleeves. That's when you got to do all the dirty work here. And we got a fun packed video for you guys, so let's get right into it.
All right, so as I mentioned, we are going to do this in tier list format, going through our top 15 tight ends or so. We're really going to skim through these. We're not going to keep you guys too long talking about tight ends. What we really want to focus on is where we're drafting these guys, our general strategy. We'll try and highlight sometimes too, when we're on underdog drafts, how many times do we want a 2 tight end build versus a 3 tight end build, depending on which tier of tight ends that we're targeting. Obviously, Travis Kelce is the tight end 1. I don't think I'm surprising anybody with that take. I'm sure he's your tight end 1 as well. With Kelce, the question you have to ask yourself is, because obviously he's the number 1 target in his offense. He plays with Patrick Mahomes. They're going to score top 5 points per game in the league, if not the most points per game in the league. With Travis Kelce, you really have to ask yourself, what is the cutoff between when I want to take Travis Kelce and when I want to go for a wide receiver or a running back in the first round? Where do you have Kelce ranked among the first round players? For me, right now, I have him ranked at 11th overall, which I think is probably a little disrespectful, just given the advantage he provides to his position. If you guys are in like a tight end premium format, I know like FFPC drafts are tight end premium, or if you're in best ball specifically, where you can't make roster moves, you can't make, trades, you can't make waiver claims or anything like that. I think in best ball, he kind of moves up more to the like 7 to 9 range. But for me, I would take, Cooper Kupp, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Austin Eckler, Christian McCaffrey, Bijan Robinson, Stephon Diggs, CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase, and Justin Jefferson over Travis Kelce. So for me, the cutoff is, when you're deciding between Kelce and like Nick Chubb, Garrett Wilson, Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, so I have Kelce currently at 10th overall, but if you want to argue him over like Eckler, I have at 9. I don't think that's bad. So overall, I think 9 or 10 areas where I would have him. And that's going to be lower than a lot of people. I know a lot of people are going to have him maybe in that 4 range, that 5 range, that 6 range. And I'm not really going to discredit them, because obviously from that perspective, if you're taking him that high, you enjoy building around the tight end. For me personally, I love getting my anchors at the flex positions. I love getting my anchor wide receiver 1 or my anchor running back 1. Or if I'm going to invest into a onesie early, I would rather wait to that 2-3 turn area and get an elite quarterback. For me, with Travis Kelce, I just personally don't find myself pulling the trigger quite a lot. And for that reason, I can't have him ranked higher. Again, I know objectively people might be in the comments saying, well, why can't you pull the trigger? Like, he's a walking 1,310 tied to Patrick Mahomes. And I understand those peripheral perspective points, but at the end of the day, we're going to give you guys our advice based off what we would do in drafts. And if I'm in a draft, I'm just very, very hesitant to be able to pull the trigger, whether it's because he's going on to 34, whether it's because, a guy like Mark Andrews, who we'll get into in a second, is much more attainable at cost. For that reason, I'm just not simply pushing the button on Travis Kelce's name quite often.
Yeah, and I know last year, you mentioned Mark Andrews. I know last year, Travis Kelce was 18.6 PPR points per game. The next closest tight end was George Kittle at 13.4, TJ Hockenson at 12.7 points per game. That represents like a 5-point per game, wins above replacement for the tight end position. But if he doesn't do that again, he's absolutely not worth a first-round pick. And whether that be because he regresses a little bit down to like 15 points per game, which will still probably make him the tight end 1, but it definitely wouldn't be like a he's better than the rest of the field type of advantage. Or the other tight ends, Andrews, Hockenson, whoever else, kind of catches up to him and closes that gap a little bit. So for me, you win fantasy football by scoring more points than your opponent, and a 17-point per game projection for Travis Kelce would easily make him the tight end 1. But there's running backs and wide receivers that have legitimate 20-point per game upside going in the same range of the draft, which is why I don't often find myself pulling the trigger on Travis Kelce as well.
Yep, no, I agree with you there. We can move off of Travis Kelce and go on to tight end 2 of our rankings. And you guys know who it is. Corey's on the name right now. We won't spend too long on Mark Andrews. We obviously know this guy's a legitimate target hog. I mean, his target share the last couple of years has been in the high 20s, which for a tight end is just absolutely ludicrous. Like, this guy commands targets up there with some of the best target commanding wide receivers in the NFL. Not to mention, he's been the tight end 2 before. We've seen the touchdown upside with this Lamar Jackson offense. And now we're having Todd Monken coming in from Georgia to potentially increase the pass volume of this offense. I wouldn't be shocked if they were one of the most increased teams in terms of passing volume. Obviously, we know with Greg Roman, they were hovering in that, 450 to 500 passing attempt range. I wouldn't be shocked if Monken, if that total closes on closer to 550 attempts. And if you're getting 550 pass attempts from Lamar Jackson and you are the clear-cut number one weapon in the offense, you deserve to be an early third-round pick for me. So if I can start my drafts at the 1 or 2 slot with Justin Jefferson, maybe a guy like Tony Pollard falls, and then I can secure a guy like Mark Andrews, I'm going to be loving all my starts from that position.
Yeah, it's funny that you bring that up, the pass volume, because I think a lot of people might fade Mark Andrews because now they have more receiving talent around Lamar Jackson to take away targets, quote unquote. But when we think about the tight end 1 season that he had back in 2021, the only time, by the way, that a non-Rob Gronkowski tight end has outscored Travis Kelce since 2016, which is a crazy stat. It took the Ravens throwing nearly 600 times in that season. And Marquise Brown was a top 20 receiver that year. So it's not like he didn't have target competition. So for me, Mark Andrews is the arbitrage bet against Travis Kelce. If you're not going to take Travis Kelce in the first round, you probably should be getting some exposure to mid-round 3, late round 3 Mark Andrews, where he's currently going. In home leagues, he might slip even a little bit more than that because of the narrative that, he has a lot more target competition and that kind of stuff. So Andrews, definitely somebody I'm much more likely to draft than Travis Kelce, even if the gap is close, even if it's, Kelce 17 points per game, Mark Andrews 15 points per game. I think advantage Andrews in that situation, knowing the price tag that you got on him.
Well, I mean, it's a lot more palpable, I would say, because even let's just say hypothetically, Mark Andrews doesn't even have to return the near 18 points per game he produced in 2021. Let's say, like you said, it's a 15, 16 point per game projection. How is that any different from some of the wide receivers going in that range? T. Higgins, Devontae Smith. Devontae Smith averaged like 15 PPR points per game last year. T. Higgins averaged like 14.9. So realistically, he's scoring about on par with the other wide receivers in this range, which I can't really make the case for Travis Kelce in the first round because guys like CeeDee Lamb, guys like, potentially Amon-Ra St. Brown this upcoming year. Obviously, we know the top 5 guys with like Cooper Kupp, Stephon Diggs. We know that those guys, their projections are like literally 18 PPR points per game would be a quote unquote slight disappointment season for those guys. And I feel like you said, Travis Kelce's projection is about in line with 17, 18 PPR points per game.
Not to mention you get legendary running back upside there with Bijan Robinson going around the range that Travis Kelce goes as well. So yeah, I will say I would much rather take Andrews than Kelce at current cost. Because the key point that I think you mentioned there is the wide receivers and running backs going in that area are probably about 16 to 17 point per game projections. And that's exactly what you're getting from Mark Andrews at their ceiling cases as well. We could probably move on to the next tight end here. I have George Kittle next. Do you have George Kittle next, or do you have a different tight end next?
Yeah, so my 3 in a row, I'll just say, I'm assuming we have the same 3 in here, are TJ Hockenson, George Kittle, and Kyle Pitts. So I'll let you make the case on George Kittle, and then I'll chime in with TJ Hockenson because it almost makes me sick having to make the case for Hockenson.
Yeah, you're a noted TJ Hockenson hater, but the reason I have Kittle slightly above TJ Hockenson is mainly because of the fact that Kittle has been routinely one of the elite tight ends in the NFL. He was tight end 2 in points per game, outscoring Hockenson last year despite being injured. Tight end 4 in points per game the year before, tight end 3 the year before that, tight end 1. Sorry, I guess he has outscored Travis Kelce before, and tight end 3 back in 2018. So he's legitimately been a top 4 tight end in points per game for 5 straight years. So he's such a clean projection. Brock Purdy, assuming he's the starter, which I think he will be, kind of showed that this offense was going to be a little bit more pass heavy than we've seen in recent years. He had a good chemistry with George Kittle. We also saw George Kittle post a very good, strong end to the season where he was scoring touchdowns. 11 touchdowns is a career high for George Kittle, and it actually smashes the rest of his seasons pretty much. So if Brock Purdy's going to look George Kittle's way in the red zone, I think George Kittle has more upside than he ever has. Not to mention, with tight ends, you're looking for route participation. You're looking for the guys that are used down the field. And George Kittle was 11th in the NFL in deep targets last year at tight end, 10th in the NFL in red zone targets, 90% route participation, was second only to Travis Kelce. You want the guy that's on the field running routes, getting targets down the field and in the red zone. And George Kittle checks every single box, and he plays in an offense that I think will be top 8, top 5 in points per game.
The only concern I have about George Kittle, because obviously, I agree with you from a talent perspective. This guy is the only tight end in the NFL I feel like from a talent perspective can challenge Travis Kelce. The concern I do have, though, is in the 6 starts that Brock Purdy made at the end of the season. Again, for what it's worth, entering year 2 into the system, he could very well see an increase in that passing volume, but he wasn't really throwing the ball a ton. We're seeing 4 out of his 6 games being in that 20 to 30 pass attempt range. And when you're on an offense with George Kittle, you're on an offense with Deebo Samuel, you're on an offense with Christian McCaffrey, you're on an offense with Brandon Ayuk, and you're not expecting a ton of passing volume, it's just simply hard for me to make that projection with George Kittle. Not to mention, the 11 touchdown score, by far a career high, nearly double his previous high with 6 the year before, oddly enough. I love George Kittle. It's tough for me to rank him above TJ Hockenson simply because of the projectable offensive volume, but he's still a guy I want to draft simply because it is George fucking Kittle. It doesn't matter what the target competition is for him at the end of the day. He's going to earn his own targets. He's going to have the opportunity to score touchdowns with, like you said, what's going to be an efficient offense. And he's a guy I'm comfortable taking in that 5th, 6th round type of area. It's just for me, I have to take him when TJ Hockenson is off the board simply because of, like I said, the offensive projection. We are hoping maybe the 49ers throw the ball 550, 575 times at the absolute peak, assuming Brock Purdy doesn't go through some growing pains. With the Vikings, I think it's pretty conservative to project them for 650 pass attempts, given what we saw last year and given the fact that Dalvin Cook is leaving town. I think the Vikings offense, you've made the case for Kirk Cousins, so I know you fully agree with this as well. The Vikings offense is going to be one of the best passing offenses in the entire NFL right now. We know Kirk Cousins is going to throw over 30, 31 type of passing touchdowns. And if that's the case, TJ Hockenson, as much as I love Jordan Addison, is right now got to be the betting favorite to be the highest target earner on this team, sans Justin Jefferson. And with TJ Hockenson, obviously, of course, we saw last year, he was extremely involved once he came over. He had 6 touchdowns, 129 targets. I feel like he can easily repeat that type of performance and potentially be, another top 3 tight end season. He was a great prospect. He finally got added to this team in the middle of the season, and he was producing like any tight end sans Travis Kelce in fantasy football.
Yeah, not to say that the Vikings won't be a great offense, but I think valuable targets is why I'm chasing George Kittle. I highly expect TJ Hockenson to out-target him, but give me the red zone targets that Kelce or that Kittle can earn. He had 7 of those 11 touchdowns with Brock Purdy as well to close out the season. So it's clear that he's kind of looking his way. There is no way to stop this offense. Like, how do you defend George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, and Christian McCaffrey? And when that's the case, when you can say that and you have a quarterback in Brock Purdy who operates the system the way that Shanahan wants it operated, then it's going to make them very challenging to stop on offense. And they're going to be hanging 30 and 40 burgers on teams. And you better bet that George Kittle is going to get touchdown opportunity in that situation. So the touchdown opportunity is really what I'm chasing. I do think while it's a career high for George Kittle, I do think it is repeatable. I think he could have another 9+ touchdown season. Whereas TJ Hockenson, while he'll probably out target, George Kittle, I think the valuable targets will be a little bit less so than what you get there. So it's kind of pick your poison. Maybe in full PPR, you favor TJ Hockenson. Maybe more in half PPR standard, you favor George Kittle there. Kyle Pitts is the other guy in this tier. I think you could almost make the argument that he deserves a mini tier below these 2 guys, but ahead of the guys that we're about to talk about. I think the reason you have to put him up here is just simply due to the upside of him being a 23-year-old, extremely talented tight end who runs in the 4.4s, who was a 4th overall pick in the NFL draft. The big time concern that we have with the Atlanta Falcons is the pass volume that they've put out there the past couple of years since Arthur Smith has been there. I think conservatively, you're projecting like 450 to 500 pass attempts for this offense. And Drake London showed that he can command like a 29-30% target share last year. And I get it. Some of it was when Kyle Pitts was out of the lineup, but I still think he's like the favorite to lead that team in targets. So for me, Kyle Pitts is going to have to be like the mini George Kittle, where he's like really efficient, downfield targets, red zone targets, that kind of thing. The only thing is that I'm a little bit more concerned that the red zone, it's Bijan or nobody else. Like, he's absolutely dominating the carry volume and the play volume in that area of the field. So Kyle Pitts is kind of left with like big plays, being efficient, kind of touchdowns and that kind of thing, which I think he can do because he's a very talented player. I don't see as clean of a projection for him as I do for George Kittle and TJ Hockenson, which is why I would say like he has kind of almost like a mini tier behind these guys.
I will say with Kyle Pitts, I do view him in the tier with TJ Hawkinson and George Kittle. You already made the profile. Obviously, this is a polarizing figure, former 4th overall pick, elite athletic tools out of the wazoo. Like, we know what he represents. Like, talent wise, if he is like the ultimate piece of talent wise, if you could put him on any offense, like he would be the tight end one there with ease. He'd be the tight end one in fantasy with ease if he was on a Chiefs offense, a Bills offense, Cowboys offense, like an offense that can really support him. But because of his situation, we're getting the discount on him at tight end 6. This is a guy last year in his second year. I understand people are going to look at the raw targets. They're going to look at the raw volume because of how slow a pace and how infrequently the team would pass last year. But the underlying metrics for Kyle Pitts do not lie here. A 27.3% target share when he was healthy last year in the 10 games, ranked second amongst all tight ends. A 34.3% target rate, so targets per route run, which would have ranked number 1 across all tight ends. Not to mention, that's combined with the fact that he had 541 unrealized air yards, which ranked first among all tight ends. He is the definition of earning your volume, playing extremely well, but being completely at the detriment of your quarterback play. Like Marcus Mariota, I cannot even express enough for what it's worth how bad he was last year. Even if Desmond Ridder is slightly below league average, and I think he can make a potential Ryan Tannehill leap, but for E's sake, let's just say he's a quarterback 25 in the NFL. The impact that is on Kyle Pitts' bottom line is tremendous because that is so much better than what Marcus Mariota was producing for him last year. Honest to God, he's just a player that I think needs some better luck. Obviously had some, deep shots that Marcus Mariota missed, hence the 541 year unrealized air yards. And he hasn't really been a touchdown scorer in his career thus far, despite being this 6'6", 260-pound freak of nature. Like, I feel like either this season or next season, we're going to see the Kyle Pitts breakout, and I'm going to take him at opportunity cost right now because when he does break out, it's going to be 1,200 yards. It's going to be 10-plus touchdowns. It's going to be the tight end 2 overall in fantasy. And at current opportunity cost, like I said, round 6 or round 7 where he's going on underdog fantasy, I'm taking that chance every single time.
Yeah, like you said, 13 deep targets led all tight ends last year. He played 10 games.
Yeah.
Like he wasn't even on the field very much. And the offense, having 13 deep targets in that offense where they barely threw the ball is pretty crazy. He had like almost a monopoly playing like outside wide receiver. Like we always talk shit about how Arthur Smith uses him. He actually uses him very well. We just need them to throw the ball more and have better quarterback play because Kyle Pitts is used, in the slot. He's used out wide. His 76.1% route participation could actually go up a little bit. I think Bijan is the missing piece to this offense. They need their elite running back to keep things on schedule, and Kyle Pitts and Drake London will be opened up because everybody will be focused on trying to stop number 7 in the backfield. So I really do think that Kyle Pitts has a chance to have a really efficient season. Same goes for Drake London. I just think the projection's a little bit cleaner for George Kittle and TJ Hockenson as Definitely it currently stands. We can move on to the next tier, though, which is round 7 and 9. I think all these guys are going to have different cases. I will put the guys that I have in this tier. You let me know who's different, and then we'll kind of maneuver around. So the guys I have ranked here are Dallas Goedert, David Njoku, Darren Waller, Pat Freiermuth, and Evan Ingram. I think when you look at all these guys, you can kind of make different cases. With Goedert and with Njoku and with Ingram, you're looking at like efficient tight ends, guys that could score a lot of touchdowns. They play in great offenses. They have, shown target earning ability, especially with Goedert and Njoku last year. And then Evan Ingram down the stretch last year, he showed that he had a real connection with Trevor Lawrence. So all of those guys, I think you're banking on like touchdown production. They're probably not going to be like the number 1, maybe even not the number 2 of their offense, especially in Goedert and Ingram's case. I would say we comfortably project A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and then Calvin Ridley, Christian Kirk to out-target both of those guys, but they could score 8-9 touchdowns in an offense that they're playing in. And then with Darren Waller and Pat Freiermuth, you're getting more of the like target projection. With Darren Waller, he could legitimately be the best receiver on his team, right? There's no real threat in New York outside of Saquon Barkley as the running back to have 100+ targets. And Darren Waller, as long as he's healthy, has a chance to do that. And as much as I want to like completely fade him because he's injury prone and he's 31 years old or 30 years old and hasn't stayed healthy the last couple of years, when he's been on the field, his peripherals have still been very strong and that of an elite tight end. So I think Darren Waller in a new landscape here, they still paid like a third-round pick to go out and get him. It means that they want to use him at a high level, and he's already getting training camp buzz saying he's the best receiver in camp. So Darren Waller is somebody that at his current price point, I think it's worth the risk. If he was like a fifth-round pick, I would be telling you guys to fade him because the downside risk is too high. But getting him in like the seventh, eighth round in underdog drafts is definitely very, very encouraging, knowing the upside that he has. And then with Pat Freiermuth, we're talking about a tight end over the first 2 seasons of his career has posted a 20+% target rate in each of his first 2 seasons and a 75+ PFF grade in those 2 seasons. The only tight ends to do so, Rob Gronkowski, Jimmy Graham, Zach Ertz, Jordan Reed, Kyle Pitts, Hunter Henry, Tony Scheffler, and now Pat Freiermuth. So we're talking about a guy who's in pretty good company as far as commanding targets, and his touchdown luck has been non-existent. If Kenny Pickett takes any remote step forward this year, he's going to be a very solid, like, chain mover, touchdown scoring tight end. He's like the new Zach Ertz, in my opinion. He's probably not going to have, the tight end 1 overall ceiling, but could he have 120 targets this year and 6 touchdowns en route to like a tight end 3 finish? I absolutely think that's possible.
Yeah, so in terms of this tier as well, I was actually looking through my overall rankings just to see if there was like any different from a valuation standpoint, and it looks pretty on par. So Dallas Goedert, I actually have around 70 overall. David Njoku in the 80s, Darren Waller in the 80s as well. So they would be like the high end of this tier, I would say, like you said, around 7 to 9 area. And then we get into the area that's like a separate like mini tier, but I would still consider in this area. I have Evan Ingram 102 and Pat Freiermuth at 108. So that's all the respective rankings. So I completely agree with you with the names and the order that you've provided. You mentioned it with Dallas Goedert, efficient option, really good offense, although his target competition is very high, and he's on a team that's not going to have a very fruitful passing environment, given the raw volume we should see there. So I do think, what is that, tight end 7? I believe we have him tight end 6. That's about appropriate with what I should expect this year from Dallas Goedert. David Njoku, I feel like, is a guy that actually has more upside than Dallas Goedert, simply because I feel like the target competition isn't quite as much. Obviously, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith sharing your field versus Amari Cooper and Elijah Moore. You're going to favor that first batch of wide receivers with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. Not to mention, I do feel like with that Browns offense, we could potentially see a higher passing volume ceiling than we saw from the Eagles this past year. Obviously, Deshaun Watson's coming in. He's been able to handle an offense that can throw the ball a ton in the past with Houston. I mean, he was basically a one-man show over there in Houston. I feel like now playing in a more complementary system, a lot more weapons at his disposal, we could see Kevin Stefanski completely tailor the offense around number 4 with his first full offseason with the team. And I feel like David Njoku can be that really efficient, target munching tight end in this offense. Could potentially threaten for the second overall in terms of targets behind Amari Cooper, in my opinion, on this team. And not to mention, if Deshaun Watson's returning to 30, 35 passing touchdown form, he's got the athletic ability to be able to rattle off, 10, 11 touchdowns this year. So I agree with those first 2 guys. Darren Waller, I'll quickly make the case for as well. I feel like he's got as clean of a path to be the number 1 receiving weapon of his offense of any single guy not in those first 3 tiers. I understand there's risk at hand here. He's an older tight end. He's coming off injury these last couple of years, but we've seen him legitimately be a 140+ target tight end in the past. So if he has any type of juice left, he's going to pay off at this round 7 to 9 ADP. And then finally, you just mentioned Pat Freiermuth and Evan Ingram. Pat Freiermuth, like you said, kind of profiles as the new Zach Ertz. Obviously doesn't have that athletic upside that we see from a guy like Kyle Pitts, David Njoku, even a guy like Dallas Goedert, but he's a steady chain mover. He's going to be a tight end 1, although he doesn't have as high as upside. I feel like he's almost a lock to be a top 10 guy. And then finally, Evan Ingram, like you said, we want to tell ourselves to good offenses. He's kind of like the Dallas Goedert light, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in best ball, maybe you favor David Njoku, Darren Waller, Evan Ingram, who have higher, touchdown ceilings. With Dallas Goedert and Freiermuth, you're kind of more so hoping that they get like tight end 7 finish on the year, but they're probably not, the biggest spike week guys. And as far as like building out a tight end core, if you guys are doing underdog drafts, these guys, once you're talking about Goedert, Njoku, Waller, Freiermuth, Ingram, I'm probably building out a 3 tight end build Whereas if I have Kittle, Hockenson, Pitts, Andrews, or Kelce, I'm probably only building out a 2 tight end build. And actually, even if I have Andrews, Kittle, Hockenson, Pitts, I'd probably like to get one of these guys as my second tight end to be done with the position and still be, strong enough to get a good amount of weeks there. So we're going to go through rapid fire our round 10 plus guys and just kind of close out our top 15 tight ends here. These are the guys that I have on this area. So I have Greg Dulcich, Dalton Kincaid, Cole Kmet, Dalton Schultz, and Gerald Everett. All of these guys kind of have their own cases. Dulcich, Kmet, and Schultz have a chance to be like number 2 options in their offense, especially considering what Cole Kmet was given in terms of his contract this past, yesterday when he actually signed it. He definitely has a chance to be pretty efficient. He actually has commanded targets quietly over the course of his career. He went from 0 touchdowns in 2021 to 7 touchdowns last year with Justin Fields as well. And he was heavily involved in the red zone. So he's actually kind of like a sneaky bet as like, the poor man's Pat Freiermuth, I think, with Cole Kmet. So I really like him. And then Dulcich, kind of the same thing. Jerry Jeudy's the only guy that I really trust in that offense. Dulcich has a chance to be the second target there. Dalton Kincaid is really a big-time upside swing because he's a rookie tight end. We have no idea what the route participation is going to be like, how often he's going to be on the field. Is Dawson Knox still the starting tight end there? So I will say, if you grab Dalton Kincaid, you better have another option. Maybe like grab Dalton Kincaid, pair him with Dalton Schultz, who we know is going to be on the field catching passes from CJ Stroud as soon as week 1, probably leading the team in targets, potentially at least early on in the season while the young receivers get their legs under them. And then Gerald Everett's more of your like best ball only type of target. I wouldn't really feel great about him if he was my tight end 1 in a season long league, because I think you're kind of just hoping for touchdowns with him, because I expect absolutely Keenan Allen and Mike Williams to out target Gerald Everett, and probably Quentin Johnston, their first round wide receiver as well. So as the 4th option in your offense, you're probably not going to come with a very high ceiling, but on any given week, given that you play in an offense that throws as much as the Chargers, you can score touchdowns and you can pay off from that perspective. So all these guys kind of bring their own thing to the table. My favorite of this group, my favorite target is Kincaid, because I am typically building out a lot of 3 tight end builds on Underdog, and I can grab Kincaid as my first tight end and bookend him with Gerald Everett and Hayden Hurst later on in the draft, and get the ceiling element that Kincaid brings me to go along with kind of the safety like spike weeks that Everett and Hurst would bring me.
Yeah, my favorite target from this range is actually Greg Dulcich, simply because I feel like he's got the opportunity to be that number 2 in the offense. He's already went through his rookie year hiccups, and this is a guy that was actually very, very productive as a rookie. He was giving you usable weeks in terms of lineup leagues as a rookie second-round pick tight end. With Greg Dulcich, we saw the flashes we need to see. 5.5 targets per game commanded last year, and what was a dumpster fire of an offense. I do feel like if Sean Payton's coming in, applying his fixing touch to this offense, maybe Russell Wilson gets back to form, like you've mentioned, he's got a clear path to be the number 2 weapon in this offense. I feel like Cortland Sutton is dust. I feel like Marvin Mims, obviously a rookie wide receiver. Tim Patrick coming off of that torn ACL he suffered last preseason. There's nothing really standing in the way of Greg Dulcich to be the number 2 weapon on this team. So getting him every single time in round 10 plus, this is a guy that I really think the projection isn't too far off of what we can expect from a guy like Pat Freiermuth, and you're getting a 2+ round discount at current cost right now for Greg Dulcich. So absolutely love him in this range. You mentioned Kincaid, similar type of situation. The only difference, the only pause I have with Kincaid is that, of course, he's a rookie tight end, and he still, has to earn the reps out there. Dawson Knox has been a productive tight end for the Bills in the past. So while I still think he's going to earn the role, because again, he was invested into as the 25th overall pick, they have plans for him. Maybe it's a week 5, week 6 type of thing where the first few weeks, Dawson Knox is showing him the ropes. Dawson Knox is going to be the inline tight end. It's going to be the goal line tight end. Maybe get some valuable looks there. Kincaid, of course, down the stretch can be this, awesome move tight end that the Bills needed in their offense. So agree with those guys being the first 2. Cole Kmet, obviously that big deal. You showed his target commanding abilities. Saw some positive touchdown regression last year, scoring 7 touchdowns. I feel like if Justin Fields does take the leap, as much as I love Darnell Mooney, missed some time last year, as much as I love, some of the Bears' other receivers, and of course, DJ Moore, Cole Kmet could potentially be, the number 2 weapon on this offense. So I definitely want to target that round 10 plus. Dalton Schultz, he may very well lead this team in targets given the state of the Texans wide receiver core and given the state of how Dalton Schultz has shown the ability to command targets in Dallas. The big question here is was it a talent thing, or did Dak made him into what he was? But ultimately here, you're getting a tight end that doesn't really have a lot of target competition in wide receiver position. So I'm definitely taking that at this point of the draft. And then finally, Gerald Everett, he's kind of like the pseudo Evan Ingram, where there's a lot of mouths to feed on these offense, but maybe he's going to be that efficient touchdown scoring, seam buster type of tight end that team needs.
Yeah, I think visually, the guy right below the guy on the previous tier is almost kind of a light version of each one. Like we have
Facts.
Freiermuth, Schultz, Evan Ingram, Everett, Darren Waller, Komet, Kincaid, and Njoku, and Dallas Goedert, Dulcich. I mean, I
Yeah.
think Dulcich is definitely another one that I'm targeting, considering Pitts led the tight end position in 10 games with deep targets. Greg Dulcich as a rookie, 84.1% routes, which is pretty crazy. Route participation. He was third in deep targets in only 10 games played. Again, kind of splitting reps early on with Alberto and some of the other guys there. His average depth of target was third in the NFL at tight end too. So yeah, definitely strategy wise for me, I'm typically bypassing Travis Kelce. I'm typically bypassing Mark Andrews as well. Sometimes I'll take some shots on Kittle, Hockenson, or Pitts in the mid rounds if they're available. But for the most part, I actually think this year, the back end range of the tight end ones is actually more appealing than it's been in recent years. I'm totally fine leaving a standard, home league draft or, stacking up 3 tight ends in an underdog draft with your cast of characters like David Njoku, Darren Waller, Freiermuth, Evan Ingram. And then if I miss out on those guys, or if I just want to pair them up with other tight ends later on underdog, Dulcich, Kincaid, Komet, Schultz, Everett, even some of the guys that we didn't talk about. I mentioned Hayden Hurst. Tyler Higbee's probably in line for some targets. We also have, Chig Okonkwo if you guys are looking for another upside swing there. So definitely some more tight end depth, I would say, than usual. We'll probably see that play out in the preseason and definitely monitor usage, with a lot of these guys, especially the rookies, Kincaid, Michael Mayer, Sam Laporta, are going to be really, really important to watch their usage in the preseason. But if you did enjoy this video, leave a like, subscribe. Can't believe we talked about tight ends for 30 minutes, but hopefully you got some value from it. Definitely appreciate you guys for sticking around. And also, if you want access to all of our rankings for redraft, for dynasty, rookie rankings, all that stuff is available on flockfantasy.com. Use the promo code FSE for 30% off to get yourself first priority on dynasty decisions. Free Zoom consultation if you guys book annually, and you'll also get 6 months for free there. And then also check out Underdog Fantasy. Take some of this advice into action. Use the promo code FSE over there as well for 100% back up to $100. And if you deposit $10 on Underdog Fantasy, you'll get our redraft rankings manifesto, which has all of our positional rankings, all of our tiers, cheat sheets, contextualized game logs, everything you could need to dominate your home league draft. That is available for just a $10 sign up on Underdog Fantasy, and you'll get our weekly rankings throughout the season to help you out with your start sit decisions as well. So if that interests you, check out both links down below in the description. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.